Imagine waking up to news so shocking it feels like a scene from a global thriller. Iran has shut down the Strait of Hormuz. This isn't just a regional event, it's a turning point with the potential to upend economies, test international alliances, and create unprecedented ripple effects across the globe. But how did we get here? And more importantly, how do we move forward? This is not merely a geopolitical chess game. This crisis holds a mirror to our shared vulnerabilities as a world deeply interconnected. The Strait of Hormuz holds immense strategic significance as one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. Situated between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, it serves as a narrow but vital conduit for the transportation of global oil and gas supplies. Approximately 20% of the world's petroleum passes through this strait, making it a lifeline for energy-dependent economies worldwide. Its closure by Iran not only sends shockwaves through the energy markets, but also underscores the fragile interconnectedness of global trade and security. Understanding the strait's importance requires examining its geographical, economic, and political dimensions. Geographically, the Strait of Hormuz is a mere 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point, with shipping lanes reduced to just 2 miles in each direction to accommodate massive oil tankers and other vessels. This physical constraint already makes navigation challenging, even under normal conditions. The strait's narrowness, coupled with the high density of traffic, creates an environment of constant vigilance and operational complexity. When Iran decides to disrupt this critical artery, the implications extend far beyond its immediate borders, transforming a regional issue into a global crisis. It isn't just a logistical challenge, it's a threat to the stability of the entire international shipping network. Economically, the strait's closure creates a cascade of disruptions. Oil prices spike almost immediately, driven by the uncertainty of supply and the potential need to reroute shipments through less efficient and more expensive paths. For oil-dependent nations, particularly those without significant reserves or alternative sources, this price surge results in significant economic strain. Industries reliant on petroleum products, from transportation to manufacturing, feel the impact almost instantly, driving inflation and reducing consumer purchasing power. The economic ripple effects touch every corner of the globe, proving that no nation, regardless of size or power, is immune to the strait's importance. For countries that export oil, such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, the closure disrupts their ability to reach global markets. These economies, heavily reliant on oil revenues, face mounting pressure to find alternative methods of transportation, often resorting to pipelines that are insufficient in capacity or not fully operational. This bottleneck exacerbates tensions among oil-producing nations, each vying to protect their economic interests while managing their fragile relationships with importing countries. The imbalance created by the disrupted flow of oil not only harms producer nations, but also forces consumer nations to reevaluate their energy strategies and dependency on foreign oil. Politically, the Strait of Hormuz symbolizes a high-stakes arena for international diplomacy and conflict. Iran's strategic position along the strait gives it significant leverage, enabling it to influence global energy markets and exert pressure on rival nations. The decision to close the strait is rarely made in isolation. It is often a response to sanctions, military threats, or political isolation imposed by other nations. By asserting control over this vital choke point, Iran sends a clear message about its geopolitical influence and its ability to disrupt global systems when pushed to the brink. The closure also places global powers in a difficult position. Nations such as the United States, China, and members of the European Union must navigate the delicate balance between ensuring the free flow of goods and avoiding direct military confrontation. For the United States, which has long been a key player in the region, maintaining the security of the strait is a cornerstone of its Middle East policy. Naval forces are often deployed to patrol and secure the waterway, raising the risk of accidental escalations or miscommunications that could lead to conflict. Similarly, China, as a major importer of Middle Eastern oil, must decide whether to engage diplomatically or take more assertive actions to protect its interests. Moreover, the Strait of Hormuz's significance extends beyond oil. It is a key transit point for liquefied natural gas (LNG), particularly from Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter. Any disruption in LNG transportation impacts energy markets, particularly in regions like Asia and Europe that rely on these supplies for electricity generation and industrial processes. The strait's closure exposes the vulnerabilities of nations that have not diversified their energy sources or invested in renewable alternatives, highlighting the urgent need for long-term strategies that reduce reliance on fossil fuels transported through geopolitically sensitive regions. Ultimately, the Strait of Hormuz is more than just a geographical feature. It is a linchpin of global trade and security. Its closure serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance that underpins the global economy and the profound consequences that arise when that balance is disrupted. The situation demands immediate attention and coordinated action from the international community to ensure stability and prevent further escalation. Understanding the strait's strategic importance underscores why its closure triggers worldwide panic and why its security must remain a priority for nations around the globe. The ripple effects on global energy markets caused by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz are profound and far-reaching, with consequences that extend well beyond the oil and gas industries. As the primary artery for nearly 20% of the world's petroleum and a significant portion of liquefied natural gas (LNG) shipments, any disruption in this critical choke point immediately sends shockwaves through economies and industries worldwide. The implications are not confined to energy exporters or importers. They touch every sector of society, from manufacturing and transportation to agriculture and consumer goods. This event highlights the vulnerability of a global system heavily reliant on uninterrupted energy flows. When the strait is closed, the immediate and most visible impact is a spike in oil prices. Markets, which operate largely on speculation and sentiment, respond almost instantaneously to the news of any disruption. Fear of prolonged shortages or uncertainty about the timeline for resolution creates a frenzy of activity among traders, driving up prices to levels that strain economies. For nations that import a significant percentage of their oil, this spike translates into higher costs for businesses and consumers alike. Transportation industries, including airlines, shipping companies, and logistics providers, face sudden increases in operational expenses, which they often pass down the supply chain to consumers. The energy price surge has a domino effect on inflation. As the cost of transportation rises, so does the price of goods that depend on these networks. Food, clothing, electronics, and even essential medicines become more expensive, disproportionately affecting lower-income households that spend a larger share of their income on necessities. This inflationary pressure can lead to social unrest, as people struggle to afford basic commodities. Governments are often forced to intervene by subsidizing fuel costs or imposing price controls, measures that strain national budgets and divert resources from other critical areas. For oil exporting nations, the closure of the strait disrupts their ability to deliver crude to international markets, creating both logistical and financial challenges. While some countries may have alternative pipeline routes or storage capacities, these options are rarely sufficient to match the scale of exports typically handled through the Strait of Hormuz. The resulting bottlenecks lead to reduced revenue streams, weakening economies that rely heavily on oil exports for their GDP. Exporters must also contend with increased competition in alternative markets, as nations scramble to find buyers for their limited supplies. The impact on liquefied natural gas LNG markets is similarly significant. Countries like Qatar, which depend on the Strait of Hormuz to transport LNG to Europe and Asia, find themselves unable to meet contractual obligations. This disrupts energy supplies for nations that rely on LNG for electricity generation and industrial processes. The ripple effects extend to global markets as countries attempt to secure alternative sources of energy, driving up competition and prices. The absence of reliable LNG deliveries forces some nations to revert to coal or other less environmentally friendly energy sources, undermining progress toward clean energy goals and exacerbating climate concerns. The crisis also exposes the vulnerabilities of energy-dependent economies that lack diversification in their energy portfolios. Nations heavily reliant on imported fossil fuels are hit hardest by the disruption, as they face both economic and strategic challenges. This event underscores the importance of investing in renewable energy, energy storage technologies, and infrastructure that can reduce dependency on geopolitically sensitive regions. For some nations, the disruption serves as a wake-up call to accelerate their transition toward sustainable and self-reliant energy systems. The disruption in energy markets also has geopolitical ramifications. As nations with significant energy reserves or alternative transport routes find themselves in a position of increased influence, countries capable of filling the gap left by the disruption in Hormuz see an opportunity to strengthen their geopolitical leverage, often demanding favorable terms in exchange for energy supplies. This reshuffling of alliances and power dynamics adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Financial markets are not immune to the effects of the closure. Stock indices often experience sharp declines, particularly in industries heavily reliant on stable energy prices, such as manufacturing, shipping, and technology. Investors seek safer assets, such as gold or government bonds, creating volatility in global financial systems. Central banks may be forced to intervene, adjusting interest rates or implementing policies to stabilize economies. These measures, while necessary, can have long-term implications for national and global economic stability. In the midst of this turmoil, ordinary citizens feel the strain most acutely. Higher utility bills, increased transportation costs, and reduced purchasing power create a tangible sense of insecurity. Public trust in government and institutions can erode if people perceive that leaders are unable to address the crisis effectively. This erosion of trust has long-term implications for political stability as citizens demand accountability and solutions to prevent future disruptions. The ripple effects on global energy markets caused by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz reveal the interconnected nature of modern economies and the critical role that energy security plays in maintaining global stability. The crisis serves as a stark reminder of the need for diversification, innovation, and international cooperation to address vulnerabilities in energy supply chains. While the immediate impacts are severe, the lessons learned from this disruption have the potential to drive meaningful change and build resilience for future challenges. The geopolitical ramifications of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz extend far beyond the immediate regional crisis. shaking the foundations of international alliances and testing the strategies of global powers. This choke point, vital to the energy supply chain and global commerce, becomes a flashpoint where national interests collide, and the stakes are heightened for every nation with a vested interest in Middle Eastern stability. The consequences of this disruption are profound, forcing countries to reevaluate their diplomatic relationships, military postures, and long-term strategies for economic and energy security. At the heart of this geopolitical upheaval lies the balance of power in the Middle East. Iran's control over the strait gives it significant leverage, allowing it to wield the closure as a strategic tool to assert its influence and push back against perceived threats or sanctions. This action signals Iran's willingness to challenge the status quo and disrupt global systems, compelling neighboring countries and global powers to respond. For regional players like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the closure is not only an economic concern, but a direct challenge to their geopolitical standing. These nations, already wary of Iran's influence, find themselves in a precarious position, needing to counteract Iran's actions while avoiding full-scale conflict. The United States, with its long-standing role as a dominant power in the region, faces a critical dilemma. Historically, ensuring the free flow of goods through strategic waterways like the Strait of Hormuz has been a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy. A disruption of this magnitude forces the U.S. to decide whether to engage diplomatically, escalate militarily, or adopt a combination of both. Each option carries significant risks and potential consequences. Military intervention, while demonstrating a commitment to maintaining global order, risks escalating tensions into a broader conflict. Diplomatic negotiations, on the other hand, may require concessions that could weaken the U.S.'s perceived authority or embolden Iran further. This balancing act highlights the complexities of maintaining influence in an increasingly multipolar world. China, as a major importer of Middle Eastern oil, is also deeply affected by the closure. Its growing energy needs and reliance on stable supply chains make it a critical stakeholder in resolving the crisis. However, China's approach is often characterized by a preference for economic engagement over military intervention. This event tests China's ability to navigate the crisis without compromising its energy security or escalating tensions with other global powers. It also raises questions about whether China will take on a more active role in Middle Eastern geopolitics, stepping into a space traditionally dominated by Western powers. European nations, particularly those dependent on Middle Eastern oil and gas, also face significant challenges. The disruption forces them to consider alternative energy sources, increase diplomatic efforts to mediate the crisis, and potentially reevaluate their reliance on the region. For the European Union, the crisis underscores the importance of a unified foreign policy and energy strategy. It also highlights the need for stronger partnerships with nations outside the Middle East to diversify energy supplies and reduce vulnerability to geopolitical shocks. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz also tests the strength of existing international alliances, such as NATO and OPEC. NATO's member nations may find themselves divided over how to respond, with some advocating for military intervention and others favoring diplomatic solutions. This division can strain the cohesion of the alliance, revealing differences in priorities and approaches among member states. OPEC, on the other hand, faces the challenge of coordinating a response among oil-producing nations with diverse interests. The organization's ability to maintain stability in the oil market is critical, but its effectiveness is often hindered by internal disagreements and external pressures. Non-state actors, such as multinational corporations and international organizations, are not immune to the geopolitical ramifications of the closure. Energy companies must navigate disrupted supply chains, while financial institutions face market volatility and economic uncertainty. These entities play a crucial role in shaping responses to the crisis, whether through advocacy for stability, investment in alternative energy sources, or engagement in diplomatic efforts. The crisis also brings attention to the broader implications of energy dependency and the vulnerabilities it creates. Nations heavily reliant on Middle Eastern oil and gas are forced to confront the long-term risks of their dependence, prompting discussions about energy diversification, renewable energy investments, and the need for more resilient infrastructure. This event becomes a catalyst for reevaluating global energy policies and accelerating the transition to cleaner and more sustainable energy sources. Finally, the geopolitical ramifications of the Strait of Hormuz's closure extend to public perception and political stability within affected nations. Governments must navigate the delicate balance of addressing domestic concerns, such as rising energy costs and economic uncertainty, while managing their international responses. Public dissatisfaction with perceived government failures can lead to unrest, further complicating the already volatile situation. Leaders are faced with the challenge of demonstrating strength and competence without escalating tensions or alienating key allies. In summary, the geopolitical ramifications of the Strait of Hormuz's closure are complex and multifaceted, reshaping relationships, strategies, and power dynamics on a global scale. This crisis underscores the interconnectedness of modern geopolitics, where the actions of one nation can reverberate across continents, testing the resilience of alliances and the foresight of leaders. It serves as a stark reminder of the critical importance of collaboration, innovation, and long-term planning in navigating an increasingly volatile world. The impact of the Strait of Hormuz's closure on civil populations and economic stability is both immediate and deeply felt, highlighting how global geopolitical events ripple through societies and affect the lives of ordinary people. The closure of such a vital trade route disrupts the flow of energy resources and goods, creating widespread economic uncertainty that permeates every level of society. For individuals, businesses, and governments alike, the consequences manifest as rising costs, financial strain, and a heightened sense of vulnerability, underscoring the interconnected nature of the modern global economy. One of the first and most visible effects is the increase in fuel prices, which skyrockets as oil and gas supplies are delayed or rerouted. For everyday citizens, this translates to higher costs at the gas pump, increased utility bills, and inflated prices for goods that rely on fossil fuels for production and transportation. The burden is particularly heavy for low-income households, where even modest price increases can mean difficult choices between essential expenses such as food, housing, and healthcare. This financial strain exacerbates existing inequalities, widening the gap between those who can absorb the shock and those who cannot. Businesses face significant challenges as well. Small and medium enterprises (SMEs), which often operate on tight margins, are especially vulnerable to sudden increases in operational costs. Transportation and logistics companies must contend with higher fuel prices, which they may pass down to their clients, resulting in higher prices for consumers. Manufacturing sectors reliant on petrochemical products experience increased production costs, which can disrupt supply chains and lead to delays or shortages of goods. These cascading effects create a cycle of economic instability that impacts all sectors, from agriculture to technology. Large-scale industries are not immune to the effects either. Airlines, shipping companies, and heavy industries that depend on consistent and affordable fuel supplies must grapple with volatile prices and uncertain access. These disruptions can lead to layoffs, reduced production capacity, and lost revenue, further compounding the economic challenges faced by civil populations. Investors and financial institutions, meanwhile, react to the instability with caution, pulling back on investments and creating additional uncertainty in the markets. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz also amplifies inflationary pressures on a global scale. As the cost of energy rises, so does the price of goods and services, creating a domino effect that impacts purchasing power and consumer confidence. Central banks may respond by adjusting interest rates, but such measures can have mixed outcomes, potentially slowing economic growth while attempting to stabilize inflation. For civil populations, these economic pressures manifest as reduced access to affordable goods and services, eroding their quality of life and creating a pervasive sense of insecurity. The psychological impact on civil populations is another significant consequence. News of the strait's closure and the subsequent economic fallout fosters anxiety and uncertainty about the future. For many, the crisis serves as a reminder of the fragility of the systems they rely on daily, from energy supply chains to the global economy. This sense of vulnerability can lead to increased stress and a loss of confidence in institutions, particularly if governments are perceived as unprepared or ineffective in managing the crisis. Governments, for their part, face immense pressure to address the immediate and long-term impacts on their populations. They must navigate the complex task of balancing domestic needs with international obligations, often under intense public scrutiny. In some cases, governments may implement subsidies to offset rising energy costs or introduce price controls on essential goods. While these measures can provide temporary relief, they often come at a significant cost to national budgets, diverting resources from other critical areas such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The disruption also highlights the vulnerabilities of countries that lack energy independence or diversified energy portfolios. Nations heavily reliant on imported oil and gas are particularly exposed to the economic shocks of such a crisis, prompting urgent discussions about energy policy and sustainability. For many governments, the closure serves as a wake-up call to invest in renewable energy sources, improve energy efficiency, and develop infrastructure that reduces dependency on geopolitically sensitive regions. These initiatives, while essential for long-term stability, require time and substantial investment, leaving populations to endure the immediate effects of the crisis. In addition to economic challenges, the closure of the strait can lead to social unrest, as populations frustrated by rising costs and perceived government inaction demand accountability. Protests and strikes become more likely, particularly in nations where economic hardships are compounded by pre-existing political instability or inequality. These events place additional strain on governments and institutions, creating a feedback loop of tension and uncertainty that further undermines economic stability. The global nature of the crisis also fosters a sense of shared vulnerability among civil populations across nations. As people witness the interconnectedness of their economies and the far-reaching consequences of a single choke point's disruption, there is a growing awareness of the need for collective solutions. This awareness can inspire calls for greater international cooperation, not only in resolving the immediate crisis, but also in addressing the systemic issues that make such events so devastating. Ultimately, the impact of the Strait of Hormuz's closure on civil populations and economic stability underscores the profound interconnectedness of the modern world. It highlights the fragility of systems that depend on the uninterrupted flow of energy and goods, while exposing the inequalities and vulnerabilities within those systems. While the immediate effects are deeply challenging, they also present an opportunity to rethink priorities, build resilience, and invest in solutions that promote long-term stability and equity for all. The historical context of the Strait of Hormuz and its repeated role as a flashpoint in geopolitical tensions provides valuable insights into the current crisis. Throughout modern history, this narrow waterway has been central to international power dynamics, economic strategies, and military conflicts. By examining past incidents and their outcomes, we can better understand the patterns that shape the present situation and anticipate potential trajectories for the future. This historical lens not only offers a perspective on the strategic importance of the strait, but also highlights the recurring themes of competition, cooperation, and conflict in global affairs. The significance of the Strait of Hormuz as a choke point for energy transportation has made it a focal point of geopolitical contention for decades. Its location, connecting the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, places it at the crossroads of key global trade routes. This strategic position has historically attracted the interest of regional powers, global superpowers, and economic stakeholders alike. During the late 20th century, particularly during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the strait became a battleground for control and influence. The Tanker War saw both nations targeting oil tankers in the strait, disrupting global energy supplies and drawing international attention to the vulnerabilities associated with this vital passage. The U.S. and its allies have long recognized the strait's critical role in global energy security, leading to significant military involvement in the region. The establishment of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain underscores the commitment to maintaining open and secure shipping lanes through the strait. However, this military presence has also contributed to periodic escalations, as Iran views such deployments as threats to its sovereignty and security. The strait has thus become a symbol of the broader contest between Western powers and regional actors over control and influence in the Middle East. The historical patterns of crisis in the Strait of Hormuz often reveal the interplay of economic and political pressures. For instance, during periods of heightened sanctions against Iran, the country has occasionally threatened to close the strait as a means of asserting its leverage. These threats have underscored Iran's ability to disrupt global energy markets and remind the world of its strategic importance. Similarly, international responses to such threats have frequently involved a combination of diplomatic negotiations, economic incentives, and military readiness, reflecting the high stakes involved in preserving the stability of this vital waterway. One of the recurring themes in the history of the Strait of Hormuz is the delicate balance between cooperation and conflict. While nations often compete for influence in the region, there have also been instances of collaboration aimed at ensuring the uninterrupted flow of energy supplies. Multinational efforts to escort tankers during times of heightened tension demonstrate the potential for collective action in the face of shared challenges. These efforts highlight the interconnected nature of global energy markets and the recognition that stability in the strait is in the interest of all stakeholders, regardless of their political or ideological differences. The lessons of history also point to the vulnerabilities of over-reliance on a single choke point for energy transportation. The repeated disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz have sparked discussions about diversifying energy routes and reducing dependency on Middle Eastern oil. Initiatives such as the development of alternative pipelines, investments in renewable energy, and exploration of other energy sources have gained momentum in response to these historical crises. While these measures take time to implement, they represent critical steps toward mitigating the risks associated with geopolitical flashpoints. Understanding the historical context also sheds light on the role of perception and communication in managing crises. The Strait of Hormuz has often been a stage for symbolic acts, with nations using the closure or threatened closure of the strait as a means of sending messages to rivals or the international community. These actions are not only about disrupting energy flows, but also about signaling power, resistance, or demands. Recognizing this dynamic is essential for interpreting the motivations behind current events and devising effective responses. The historical patterns of tension and resolution in the Strait of Hormuz also highlight the potential for innovation and adaptation in addressing such crises. Technological advancements in surveillance, navigation, and energy transportation have contributed to mitigating some of the risks associated with the strait. At the same time, the rise of new economic powers and shifts in global energy demand have altered the geopolitical landscape, creating opportunities for new strategies and alliances. Ultimately, the historical context of the Strait of Hormuz underscores the enduring significance of this narrow waterway in shaping global events. Its repeated role as a catalyst for geopolitical tension reflects both the strategic importance of energy resources and the broader dynamics of power and competition in the international system. By studying these patterns, we can gain valuable insights into the present crisis and work towards solutions that prioritize stability, cooperation, and long-term resilience. The lessons of history remind us that while the challenges are complex, they are not insurmountable, and the path forward requires both a deep understanding of the past and a commitment to innovation and collaboration. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz is not merely a regional issue, but a crisis that underscores the fragility of global interdependence in an increasingly interconnected world. The ramifications extend well beyond the Middle East, serving as a reminder of how deeply nations, economies, and populations rely on the uninterrupted flow of resources, information, and goods. This event challenges existing systems, reveals vulnerabilities, and calls for a reevaluation of priorities to strengthen resilience against future disruptions. One of the clearest illustrations of global interdependence is the immediate impact of the strait's closure on international energy markets. Nearly 20% of the world's oil supply and a significant portion of liquefied natural gas pass through this narrow waterway. When this lifeline is disrupted, importing nations face soaring costs, disrupted supply chains, and economic uncertainty. The effects are not contained within national borders. They ripple outward, influencing global markets, affecting trade balances, and creating volatility that impacts even those far removed from the Middle East. The crisis serves as a stark reminder that energy security is a shared concern, and any weakness in this area can destabilize the global economy. This event also highlights the intricate web of relationships that underpin modern geopolitics. Nations with vested interests in Middle Eastern stability, whether as energy importers, exporters, or strategic allies, must coordinate their responses to manage the crisis effectively. However, this is no easy task, as competing interests often lead to conflicts over strategy. For example, while some countries may advocate for military intervention to reopen the strait, others may push for diplomatic negotiations to de-escalate tensions. The challenge lies in finding common ground amid diverse political, economic, and ideological perspectives. The economic consequences of the strait's closure further reveal the interconnectedness of global trade. The disruption of energy supplies affects industries far beyond the oil and gas sector. Manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, and technology, all reliant on stable and affordable energy, experience cascading effects. The crisis underscores the importance of diversified supply chains and the risks associated with over-reliance on a single region or choke point. It prompts nations and businesses to reconsider their strategies, emphasizing the need for resilience and adaptability in a volatile world. The strait's closure also exposes the vulnerabilities of countries that lack energy independence or robust contingency plans. Nations heavily reliant on imported oil and gas find themselves at the mercy of global markets and geopolitical events. This dependence creates a ripple effect, as these countries must contend with inflation, reduced industrial output, and social unrest. The crisis highlights the urgent need for investment in renewable energy, alternative energy routes, and technologies that reduce dependence on fossil fuels. It serves as a wake-up call for nations to prioritize energy diversification and sustainability to mitigate future risks. Beyond the economic and geopolitical implications, the closure of the strait brings attention to the human dimension of global interdependence. Ordinary citizens worldwide feel the effects through rising energy prices, increased costs of goods, and economic uncertainty. These impacts are particularly acute in low-income communities, where even small price hikes can lead to significant hardship. The crisis serves as a reminder that the decisions made by governments and corporations have real and immediate consequences for people's lives, emphasizing the need for policies that prioritize equity and social stability. The event also challenges the resilience of global institutions tasked with maintaining stability. Organizations like the United Nations, NATO, and OPEC must navigate the complexities of the crisis, balancing the need for swift action with long-term considerations. The strait's closure reveals the limitations of these institutions, highlighting the need for reform and innovation to address the challenges of an interconnected world. It underscores the importance of international cooperation and the development of mechanisms that can respond effectively to crises while promoting peace and stability. Technological advancements and globalization have deepened interdependence, but they have also created new vulnerabilities. Cybersecurity threats, misinformation campaigns, and the weaponization of trade are modern challenges that complicate responses to traditional crises like the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This event demonstrates the importance of integrating technological and geopolitical strategies, leveraging innovation to build more resilient systems and mitigate risks. Finally, the closure of the strait serves as a moment of reflection on the broader implications of global interdependence. While interconnectedness has brought unprecedented economic growth and technological progress, it has also heightened the risks associated with disruption. The crisis challenges us to consider how we can build systems that are not only efficient, but also resilient, equitable, and sustainable. It calls for a collective effort to address shared vulnerabilities, recognizing that no nation or region can address these challenges in isolation. In conclusion, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is a powerful reminder of the complexities and challenges of living in an interconnected world. It reveals the vulnerabilities of global systems while highlighting the opportunities for innovation, collaboration, and resilience. By addressing these vulnerabilities and prioritizing long-term stability, we can turn this crisis into a catalyst for meaningful change, ensuring that the lessons learned pave the way for a more secure and sustainable future.